Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's episode of the Science of Sales and Marketing. So excited to have Sameer Ather, CEO of XpertDox. Sameer, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me here. Thank you, Abdul. Thank you, Caitlin.
Yeah, excited to have you. So you have a really kind of interesting story, right? You're a physician turned CEO. I want to hear that story of your medical education and how you transitioned and why, right? Did you see some sort of errors, issues, and so forth? So let's take us back to Sameer a few years ago before you were XpertDox founder. How did you get to here?
I believe I was never an intentional founder or CEO. It was never an intent. Entrepreneurship was not a goal in itself. The goal when I moved from India to US was how to have a bigger impact in healthcare, and not just as a physician, but a bigger impact. I had pretty good mentors who I really respect at Baylor College of Medicine and other places. Very early on, I applied for a research track during my residency when I did my PhD. And at the time, while I was exploring different topics where I would like to focus, one of my mentors, Dr. Doug Mann at Baylor, mentioned that one day AI will impact healthcare in a very big way. And this conversation is not 4 years back, 5 years back, but this was, I believe, six. So 2006, he was a visionary. He said when a patient would come in, AI would guide the resident doctor what to do, what not to do. It will determine how clinical care happens. And that was very impactful for me at the time. So when I started my research in 2008, I focused very heavily on application of AI. And the area I was focusing in is called personalized medicine. Now, personalized medicine is that when we test drugs on 5,000 patients, 10,000 patients. And if a drug works in 60% of those patients, it's called a success, right? So, but then what happens in the rest of the 40% of the patients? The drug could have had no impact, or the drug could have had an adverse event for those. But we discount those 40% of the patient. We say this drug is great for all of those patient population. Personalized medicine is how to identify only the select patients, or which drug or which clinical care is right for you, for who you are, for your genotype, for your phenotype, for your metabolic profile, and not just based on three or four things: your age, gender, and other things. That was my sort of foray into something beyond clinical care, and I continued to pursue it um, till 2015, when it struck me that patients with rare diseases were having a difficult time finding physicians who are specialized in their disease, because again, rare diseases are very rare. That led me, and I figured out that it would be very difficult within academic boundaries to pursue something like this and do it fast enough. And that was sort of my foray, that I would have to do something on my own and outside academic world. So again, an accidental entrepreneur.
Got it. And so it's actually really kind of interesting what you said about in 2006, your mentor said that, AI will take over. And this is before electronic medical records were even widely used at all, right? This is well before
I
that.
absolutely right. EHRs had become popular by then, except that not everything was electronic. I still remember my internship in New York, where I was still doing all of my paper charts for my clinical encounters, my inpatient encounters. We would get labs, and I would actually go to the x-ray and actually get the x-rays and actually see the x-rays the traditional way you see in TV series, right? These
Yeah.
days. Yeah, it was before that everything went on to EHR. You're right.
Very, very forward-thinking individual. Now, so your vision with XpertDocs is to kind of reduce errors and improve the efficiency of the healthcare delivery. But how did your experience as a practicing physician, how did that inform this vision?
I think being a physician has allowed me to understand the problems which are difficult to understand otherwise, if you're outside, if you're not inside the whole world of healthcare. And the second aspect is, when it comes to finding a solution for that problem, it provides me an insight. And I think it doesn't hurt to have trained in AI and other aspects of research and clinical care, that I can sort of fall back upon those experiences when trying to find a solution for the problem.
And Caitlin, feel free to chime in if you have any questions or comments to it as well. What I'm curious about for you, Sameer, is if you're as you started thinking about building XpertDox, how did you? At what point do you feel like you started to see a product market fit? Do you feel you have that already, or do you feel like you're still working on that, or do you just intentionally know, based on my past experience, this is going to be a product that's going to be adopted?
I think I can tell this to anybody, any audience that listens to this podcast is product market fit is probably one thing that you should strive for, that you should look for. And if you find it, don't let go and have a laser focus to pursue that. But product market fit is extremely difficult. I think people all over try to find a product market fit. I don't know if there is a way to predict it. You might be in, I think when we start as a founder, we are so optimistic, we're so idealistic that we are blindsided, and we don't have a good vision whether it's going to be, whether this is a product that the market really needs. And I believe that finding a product market fit, we have been lucky. We've had a few pivots to find a product market fit, and at this time we do have a product market fit. We are expanding fast. But for any future entrepreneur, I would say don't think that your first product will have a product market fit. Keep experimenting. Don't put too much effort, don't put too much money in. Get the first minimum viable product out, test the markets, and you may have to evolve. It could be a little bit of an evolution, or it could have be a complete pivot, but keep trying till you find the right fit. Only then start scaling.
Just kind of going deeper on that. I mean, knowing you had a couple pivots that you mentioned, you went through this process of building, getting to an MVP, experimenting. What did the process look like? Two pieces. One, how did you experiment with those early products to get the feedback you were looking for in order to determine then follow-up question, at what point do you decide, okay, we're not seeing what we need to see here, we need to pivot and try something new?
It's growing a business is a catch-22 situation. If you're not fully in your business, nobody else is going to believe in your business, and nobody's going to put their money and effort into your idea. And if you put all your chips into one basket, it's very difficult to pivot if it does not succeed. So initially, we did not raise money. We took only money from friends and family. We built out the product, got great feedback for patients with rare diseases. We actually enrolled patients for clinical trials through that piece. But within a year, we realized that reaching out to consumers directly is an extremely expensive way to grow a business. And with the limitations we had, and everybody will have their own limitations, we were not on the coast. We are there's no big venture funds or PE firms who are willing to back you. That we did not put in that much money. And as soon as we found that it was difficult to grow as a B2C company, a business reaching out to consumers directly, and got an interest from a business partner, we did make the pivot. And I think one should be ready to not hold on to your original idea if success is what you're looking for. And that's what we did. We were willing to let go of an idea and a product if we were not able to scale fast enough.
Mm-hmm.
How difficult was that for you personally?
Very much so. For me, when we started, helping patients with rare diseases was, I would say, close to my heart, patient access. And we would potentially bring that product back at some point if we have the bandwidth. So it is difficult to let go. There's also a little bit of a satisfaction when you're reaching out to consumers directly. You have patient stories. You get testimonials. You know that you have helped someone in their journey of clinical care. When you're working with businesses, which I mean at the time it was universities and large health systems, you know you are impacting a lot of their patients, but you don't have those stories directly. So it is difficult, but as long as our values were being met, we were still in healthcare, we were still improving clinical care, we were making healthcare more efficient. We were happy to make that pivot as long as that meant that the company could keep growing. And again, it goes back to what was the original goal, is to have a bigger impact than just being a clinician. So success of the company is a direct correlation of the impact I or my co-founders would have in
Got it.
healthcare.
Got it.
And now that, the pivot that most recently is now what XpertDox is today, which is automated medical coding, going through that process, what was different about the early experimentation and market feedback that you all got that determined, okay, we have something here that we really think we can grow and build?
I would say, as a founder, a product market fit, if it happens, you see it right away. Our first version that we implemented at our friend, colleague, and investors' urgent cares was extremely basic. It is as basic as it gets, absolutely basic. The return on investment for them was so profound. If I was to give an example, they were behind almost 4 weeks or 5 weeks in submitting their claims to the insurance companies. And if you don't submit those claims to the insurance companies, you don't get paid. If you don't get paid, how do you pay your doctors, your nurses, your staff to continue being in business? When we went live with them, we brought that delay down from 4 to 5 weeks to 1 or 2 days.
That's amazing.
Wow.
Now, it may not have been a very sophisticated product, but for them to get their claims out in a timely fashion was big enough that they were willing to put in a good word with other people, and people who heard that were willing to give us a chance to maybe improve upon the previous version and implement again. But we were showing a very solid ROI, a return on investment, for our partners, even with a very basic product. And once we had the fit, we knew that we had to just have a laser focus on that and keep getting clients' feedback. Every time we get a feedback, we look at it as an opportunity to improve it for everybody else. So I think in terms of sophistication, we have grown X since the first one, but we saw a product market fit even with that basic version.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Now, given your medical background as a physician, do you find that that gives you more credibility with clients?
I would think so, and I hope so. I think being a physician does lend some credibility. Being cross-trained in basic science research and AI also lends credibility. But I would say at the end, in this world, it's all about what is the ROI for the partners out there. We have great client success stories. We don't have a sales team.
Wow.
Almost all of our growth is by word of mouth, which means if you focus on your clients, your partners, you hear them and you keep implementing the feedback that you get, I think you would grow yourself. I don't think people look at me as a physician and say, well, I want to work with this company. But I think it does probably lend some credibility.
I think that just speaks to the power of having those early customer stories and really compelling metrics. And one of the things that Abdul and I see, and you probably see it as well, is there's so many companies who are launching AI or claiming AI, but they don't really have anything to show in terms of ROI, or maybe they have these sort of vague metrics of X efficiency or something like that. Anything to add in terms of, in this landscape where there's so many different AI solutions popping up, how you all have been able to sort of differentiate and stand out, to kind of cut through that noise, both from just the product perspective. I think you've spoken to some of that, but also like the message and some of that piece.
So I believe I won't be able to give a message to anyone and everyone building it an AI enabled company because there are so many nuances to that question. There may be technical founders out there who have very deep understanding of the processes of AI and who are building fundamental products that are just improving those neural networks model or whatever model they are using out there. If you're doing something like that, you need a founder or you need an investor who believes in your vision and your past history and is willing to put in vast sums of money for many years without seeing a return. Because if it really takes off, it will change the whole landscape. We haven't done that. But I believe when we are seeing AI creeping into all aspects of healthcare or any part, any business, is that part of application of AI. These models are out there. The computing power is out there. The computer languages, even kids are learning them. Then now it becomes a tool. And it is a very important not to have the buzzwords in your company, but to see whether you can use this tool to actually solve a problem, or are you using just this tool to raise some money?
Mhm.
So if you are solving a problem, whether it's through AI, whether it is anything else, as long as you're solving a problem, I believe you will succeed. And if you're not solving a problem, whether it's with AI or without, I think those are the companies that may falter at some point. So they're completely different types of businesses. I don't think one message fits all, right? I think everybody will have their own journey.
What's your least favorite AI buzzword?
I think it's AI itself.
AI itself. Fair enough.
It's AI itself. How do we define AI is very variable in how everyone perceives that acronym, artificial intelligence. Most people who are not in the field really believe when they hear the word AI is a machine thinking like a human, and that's what they think. But AI, the way it is implemented, is bunch of very sophisticated processes, decision trees, neural networks, which are layers and processing billions of data points and making these small incremental judgments and sort of decisions, and then everything accumulates to come up with a final decision, is a process. It's improvement. Now, one day we may have intelligence, but AI at this time is just a tool that we should all not be afraid of, but should be willing to learn more about and ready to implement wherever we can to make our current processes more efficient, save money, make them more accurate. I think that's how we should perceive AI at this time.
Knowing what you just said, which is there's a lot of different perceptions of what AI means and how it works and what it does, how have you all been managing that with your customers and prospects in terms of how do you explain it to them? What misconceptions do they have? And how do you kind of ensure that they clearly understand what you all do and the value you deliver, though it is AI and they might be bringing with
Right.
them a lot
Absolutely.
of misconceptions when they have
No,
a
no,
problem?
I completely agree. So, one big difference that we have seen since 2020 is when we would go and talk to practices, physicians, CEOs of health systems and practices, the first reaction used to be skepticism. They would ask, what if AI makes huge amounts of mistakes? Will it be as accurate as humans? How can we trust a machine to make a decision? In 2025 now, it's not a question that they ask anymore. They reach out to us and say, we know that the machine is going to be more accurate. What sort of solutions do you have? And will they help our practice or not? So there's been a paradigm shift in the perception of business owners. Everybody is racing to get ahead. They want to future proof their practice. They want to have efficiency gains. They want to save money. They want to optimize their revenue. They want to have a branding that and maybe for their investors or stakeholders to say, well, we are doing everything in our capacity to make sure we have used every tool available in the current world to optimize operations. But again, coming back to your specific question, how do they perceive and what's our message to them? Our message to them is always, I'm quite sure your RCM costs are high, quite sure you have a delay in submitting your claims, quite sure you are getting denied by insurance companies, you're not getting paid, and quite sure you're missing some revenue on the table. We have shown again and again, multiple times, that it's cheaper, it's faster, it's much more accurate, reducing denials to literally negligible, and it finds missed revenue opportunities which humans might miss otherwise. And we continue to sort of lead them that look at hard numbers, because anybody and everybody can throw buzzwords, but you have to look for is what are the real numbers that you can expect if you implement this.
Yeah. I mean, essentially, you're talking about what I call evidence-based marketing, right? In healthcare, we're talking about evidence-based medicine all the time. You're doing kind of the equivalent from the kind of sales perspective, the go-to-market perspectives. You're showing the actual ROI of what you've achieved at other places, right? And to the point you mentioned, you don't even have a sales team at this point in time, right? So, I guess
That's
which
yeah.
pretty impressive, right? So that's to me that says a lot about people willing to look at those numbers and accept that there's a basis of reality here. Whereas if you hear a lot of the claims that are made by a lot of companies in the AI space, I mean, everybody's making all kinds of wild claims, right?
Yes, I think in the end, what matters too, they can get through sort of a pilot phase, they can get through some initial implementation. But again, as I say, in the end, it's all about success of everybody's own company. And if your partner organization does not see the benefit, you won't have that stickiness. You won't last that long. And we have shown that once we go live at a place, we are there for many years. It's just because of the value we generate for. But again, that goes back to why and what we do. The goal of XpertDox was always to continue to evolve, continue to do new things, hyper focus on our clients, get their feedback. We believe the only way, you asked me a question very early on, Abdul, is does being a physician help me understand the problem better? But I would say is healthcare is so vast that clinicians, for what we are doing right now is autonomous medical coding, actually have minimal idea. So we have to get the feedback from our clients. Those are
Mhm.
the people who are giving us, okay, here's our problem, here's still an unmet problem, and we cannot ever trivialize that feedback. So we take that feedback very seriously, we focus on that, we build solutions around it, and that's how we just continue to improve.
And I think the notion of just going problem first is just underappreciated as a strategy because I mean, I know we talk about this in marketing. It fundamentally comes down to, we call it a lot of times like a pain point, and then what's the benefit or value that addresses and solves that pain point. Obviously, the pain points need to be such that someone is willing to buy a solution or they need to buy a solution to solve it. There's plenty of pain points that we all have in our business lives where we're not willing to put up money to solve them, but they're minor annoyances. But even that fundamental, like understanding the problem deeply, asking what's an unmet need and building to solve that is an approach that not a lot of companies take. They sort of build in a silo of, we think this technology is really cool, which
Right.
there's value in that exploration as well, as you had mentioned, but it's easier said than done, of course, but that approach of really understanding the urgent pain points that your audience has and building to address that is so powerful.
Absolutely. And actually, you also touch upon a point there is for, again, founders and entrepreneurs. Is your product a want or a need to the people who would be using it? Interestingly, for many practices and healthcare systems initially, clinical research and trial was a want and not a need. Medical coding is a need because if you don't get paid by the insurance company, the operations of the health system and practices just shuts down. So it is very important. I again, as I mentioned, when I started, I'm an accidental entrepreneur, accidental founder. Did not really think through all these aspects. Again, there are books written about this. But if your product is a want, you're going to have a very hard time scaling and adoption. If your product is a need and you solve even a small bit of a problem, you'll have many people who would want to even use your alpha or beta product in their systems.
Yeah, I mean, that comes back to the product market fit concepts, right? Once you have it, people will go for it.
Absolutely.
Just as you've mentioned this multiple times, I think it's really interesting. I mean, you all don't have a sales team. So what does that process look like? Are you doing all the sales or why haven't you needed to invest there?
We have decided, Caitlin, to grow responsibly. I'm not a 20-year-old who's going to play around with an idea. If it fails, then move on to the next one. My attention span is, I don't know which generation I fall in, is pretty long. Want to grow responsibly, don't want to burn through too much cash.
Mhm.
And as long as we are seeing a 2x growth every year, which we are, I remain satisfied by not actually burning through a lot of cash. It's not that we would not want to have a sales team. I think every founder, entrepreneur, CEO, or leader has to decide how to use the funds that they have wisely.
Mhm.
And we have devoted almost all of those funds on the technical side, solving again our partners' needs. So every time we get a feedback, there's always a new product. At this time, I would not say product, but a feature. We are probably building at least 3 new things at any given time. So that's where we have allocated most of the resources. And we believe that if we keep doing good work, that new partners, new clients would come on their own.
Got it. Yeah. So in terms of building the product itself, where did you know to start? I know you made a comment a while back that if in the first version, if it could even meet 1/100th of its current
Right,
capabilities, it's doing better than what the manual coding process is, right? Which is shocking to be in this era and still say that's how far behind the system is.
right.
How did you know where to start and how did you kind of build that? I know you said input from the market, but take us through that a little bit deeper.
So Abdul, I think then it falls back on, do you have really good partners, co-founders, and team? Even if you identify a problem and you have an idea of what the solution could look like, I think you need a whole team to be able to accomplish something like that. You can't do it all alone. And if you can, then that's awesome. But even with all my cross training as a physician and working in the field of AI, I think I rely very heavily on a team, brainstorm all the ideas, try to figure out what a potential solution may look like, always explore the simplest way to solve a problem. My only feedback continuously is, what's the simplest way to solve a problem? It's very easy to solve a problem in a more complicated way. The simple you keep, the less it breaks, the cheaper it is, the faster the implementation. And then, of course, you can keep layering that simple solution with more and more complex layers thereafter. You don't have to build the most complex thing to start with.
I was going to ask one more question, just as you've mentioned this a couple times as well, that you primarily see kind of, growth marketing through word of mouth, that's a really common and popular channel. And just any more to add to that in terms of, I mean, it speaks to obviously how powerful and useful your customers have found the product, but what do you kind of see as the most useful, in addition to word of mouth, or if you want to expand on that further, kind of useful tactics from a marketing perspective? To get the word out about your product.
So I don't remember the book I was reading. I wish I remember the title, but it said, "Don't focus on sales, focus on marketing." And I can't remember the name of the book, but if I find something, I'll email you later.
Yeah.
Yeah, send me that because I want to send it to some salespeople I know.
I read a lot of books, so I'll have to look back. But there is a book that I was reading. Again, I don't want to give a wrong name out there, but we don't shy. We are not shy about marketing. We do want to put our name out there. We do want to put the value that we have generated for our partners out there. What we don't do is make cold calls. What we don't do is try to reach out to people who are not yet ready
Mhm.
for a solution. What marketing does is you remain in the subconscious mind. And when your client, your partner, your target audience is ready to adopt a solution, they remember you. I think that way, when we get a lead, the chances of conversion are absolutely great. So, word of mouth, or we use, I think we get a lot from the press releases we do with our partners. I call them word of mouth too, because getting a press release out from some of these organizations is no easy task. And if they're willing to put their logo out there, with you, I would say it's a word of mouth marketing. And those exercises, I think, have helped us gain recognition in this segment.
That's fascinating. I'm going to throw two data points at you right now. Okay. So the first one is there was some studies done in the last year or two in the world of marketing, which are making the rounds. The first one is that only 5% of your clients are ready to buy at any one point in time, right? So if you're trying to sell to the
Yes,
likely you're going to reach the 95,
I believe you. Yes.
right? So
Even if they have a problem, right? That's an assumption? Yes,
yeah, because they're not in the buying cycle, they don't have the budget,
you're right.
whatever it may be, 10 different
Yes,
reasons, right? So you have to be able to find the 5%, and the way you find the 5% is by doing marketing, just exactly what
yes.
you're saying. The second piece that is an independent study, but it goes in my mind very well, is that at the in the business to business world, 86% of clients choose the vendor they knew before the buying process started. So they'll go into a competitive bid for whatever technology. They'll have 4, 5, 6 vendors come in, invite them in, but they'll 86% of the time they choose the one that they knew before. And if they didn't know them, then
If I was to layer a little bit more, because I, again, not saying it was part of the study, Abdul, I've seen if you make them believe, or if they believe that it was their decision to choose something,
Mm-hmm.
that has a much stronger positive emotion into it than somebody telling them that this is the company to go with. So if you go online and if you could just type our company's name and go to any of these software buying websites, whether it's G2, Slashdot, SourceForge, or any of these numerous websites out there, we are probably the only, and all our clients, their reviews are out there. So, and again, it's word of mouth. It's all our partners. I'm talking about large clients willing to put their name and their title and their company's name and put a review out there. And I think that's the approach we have taken.
and that leads to the whole concept of the brand is so important. You have to develop that brand awareness, that brand credibility up front before you go into the sales cycle. So I love the approach you're taking. I fully believe in it. So I'll follow up with you on that book because I really want to know which book it was.
I'll try to figure it out. Yes.
I also love the term you used, subconscious, because that's a lot of how brand operates. It's not obvious things. It's that, oh, I've heard of this company many times and I see people I trust talking about them or willing to stand by, and you're not thinking about those actively, but those touch points add up over time so that when you are ready to buy, there's a positive feeling that you have towards the
Right.
company. And it can be hard. Like, a lot of leaders don't, it's hard to know the importance of that when you're not seeing the direct ROI, as in it's converting
No.
tomorrow.
I completely agree with you, and I completely believe marketing and branding take precedence over sales.
Yeah.
I
It's a
think
unique
sales
position.
are important.
Oh,
Sales are important. But they come after you have done your due diligence in the world of branding and marketing.
Yeah. I guess the third data point to that is that 70% of the purchase decision has already been made by the time they contact you, right? So they'll have done all their due diligence ahead of time. They'll have talked to other users of the product. They'll have looked at your G2 ratings. They'll have
Yes,
did the research on.
I think so. Abdul, again, I don't really have numbers for ourselves,
Mhm.
but given that we get a lot of inbound inquiries from large health systems,
Mm-hmm.
I'm quite sure they are seeing us somewhere out there. Our conversion rates are good, which means that they have, supporting what you just said, is they have already made up their mind.
Yeah.
They just want reassurance.
And that's exactly, and those are actually your metrics to look for, right? Whether you're actually doing well in your marketing efforts is when you're getting that inbound, that spontaneous inbound. To you, it's spontaneous. To them, it's not. They know exactly where they're coming from, right? So those are fantastic insights. I
Yeah,
guess
this is great.
one other question here is, as I kind of let you kind of thank you, and want to make sure we're respectful of your time here. If you were to talk to other entrepreneurs like yourself who are starting to build these tools, or maybe just a little bit behind you, what's the advice that you would give them? What should they look out for? What should they do?
Learned a lot with somebody who has made a few pivots. I have at least 2 or 3 things that I think I wish I knew beforehand. One is there is no easy way to success. You can read about these things, but you only know it once you do it. There is no easy path to success. It's a long road, a lot of hard work, a lot of sacrifices. And I wish somebody had told me before because I did not know. The second thing is, as I mentioned, your first idea, don't hold on to it. It may succeed, invariably does not. Again, a lot of past entrepreneurs have said in the past, the same thing is it needs a couple of pivots on an average before you can find what is required out there, not what you want to build for them. I would say those 2 things. And the last thing is what we already discussed is don't put all your eggs in one basket on day one. Try out. If it's really what the world needs, you will have a quick adoption. And if the world doesn't need it, you can keep putting as much money as you want. You can raise all the money that you want, and the world will still not need it with the most sophisticated product out there. I think those are the couple of things that I've learned over time.